follows an extract from my book Letters from the Broom Cupboard, available from Amazon. Dear reader, my heart sinks into my boots when a student walks into a lesson sporting telltale bandages on their hands, sporting being the operative word here. I know that I'm in for at least a few weeks of single-handed combat at the piano. If it's a flute student, then we're totally scuppered and restricted to music theory but with no writing. Although I was that kid who never got picked for the sports team and was thankful to be overlooked, I realised that not everybody conforms to this stereotype. Many of my younger pupils are actively involved in numerous sports, and Terry, my long-standing adult pupil, is busier playing football and squash than I ever was with a family of 3 children. Karen is one of my most able students, and she also represents her school for both cross-country running and netball. It's not unusual for her to turn up to her lesson wearing her PE kit and a ruddy complexion after just finishing a league tournament and a hasty pack of sandwiches before she turns her thoughts to music. Netball and basketball are the worst possible sports that a musician can play. Usually injuries sustained in other sports aren't quite so detrimental to musical performance. For example, leg injuries sustained in football skirmishes, or that specific tight ball of bruising from the squash ball are lamentable but don't particularly impinge upon woodwind or piano performance. I suppose that facial injuries from a rugby scrum could have a damaging effect on a flute player's embouchure, but it's a combination that I've never encountered. Unfortunately, lessons are constantly disrupted by numerous permutations of strapped fingers after a misjudged attempt at catching a netball or basketball. They are heavy things, and fingers have a tendency to succumb to the physics of force and motion, and so they bend or snap backwards after a hefty throw. They also take a long time to mend. Megan is a fine example of breaking the boundaries of stereotyping. When she began high school, she was something of a lost cause and was known as a troublemaker. Somehow her hands found their way to a piano keyboard, and she hasn't looked back since. She is now a model student. She's hard-working, has a lovely attitude, and is a very capable musician. I'm duty-bound to add that her salvation can't solely be attributed to her affinity with the piano, as she took up boxing and running at about the same time. No doubt these activities go a good way towards channeling her previously pent-up aggression, leaving her becalmed spirit to express itself through the beautiful music she practices so diligently. I have no qualms about any conflict of interest, because her legs, which run so capably, are no concern of mine. And although boxing does involve her hands, the size of the gloves she wears removes any lingering doubt. A less regular source of consternation, but still a matter of concern, is the pastime of skiing. Although not usually a weekly activity, it holds the potential to create an annual disturbance, usually just around exam time. It seems that if you fall when skiing, simply anything can break. As I've already mentioned, broken legs don't intrinsically concern me. Fingers, however, are a constant source of worry and have often meant a cancelled exam over the years. Even if the fall was months before the exam date, the resultant lack of practice and preparation means that the exam material won't be ready in time. The most extreme case I've come across was a skiing accident which resulted in a broken collarbone just weeks before a prepaid flute exam. The most obvious course of action was to cancel the exam, and the student would have to forego the exam fee, which wasn't burdensome. Either the family was exceptionally thrifty, or they had a hardy, disciplined approach to life, as the parents insisted that everything should proceed as planned. The poor lad had to practice holding his flute with his right elbow resting on a bookcase shelf to take the strain from his painful collarbone. His well-meaning mother was also unfortunately rather overbearing, and for the first week insisted that she herself should support his arm as he played. What 15-year-old wants his mother clutching at his elbow and peering over his shoulder for half an hour at a time? I can't imagine that she forbore to comment during this time either. I'm not convinced that she could actually keep quiet for that amount of time. Attempting a little diplomacy, it was suggested that the student himself would best know what was most comfortable, and so as not to cause further damage with inappropriate pressure being unwittingly exerted on the injury, the bookcase took over the job. A happy byproduct was that any helpful comments that the mother might have felt incumbent to bestow had to wait their turn. My husband, David, used to participate in all sorts of extreme sports. He'd go rock climbing with no ropes, which I'm convinced is why he now has Raynaud's in his fingers. He also ran marathons, which is why his knees are now shot to pieces. I'm pleased to report that because I've spent years just sitting playing the piano, all of my joints are just fine. Gratefully yours. For the full collection of Letters from the Broom Cupboard, available from Amazon in paperback or as an ebook, follow the links in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.